Shall we start, madam?
Yeah, we can
Good
start.
morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. This is being organized by the Kerala Society of Ophthalmic Surgeons. And we have our president, Dr. Meena Chakravarti. She'll say a few words before we start this webinar. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Rajiv. Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to you for this webinar organized by the Kerala Society of Ophthalmic Surgeons. We have a very experienced teacher, and I'm sure this program is going to be a boon for postgraduate students. I hope you have a very useful session and stay safe. Okay, Rajiv, can start the program.
Thank you, madam. And I request Dr. Gopal to introduce the speaker to the audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajiv. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. It gives me immense privilege and pleasure to introduce one of my closest friends and allies, my friend, philosopher, and guide, Dr. Mahesh Gopalakrishnan, to you. He's a second generation ophthalmologist. His father, Dr. Gopalakrishna Iyer, was a legendary ophthalmologist in Thrissur and Palakkad area. Studied initially in Thrissur, followed by his education in Trivandrum Medical College in MBBS as well as MS Ophthalmology. He went to Shankar Nethralaya, beating a lot of odds, and came out meritorious, one of the best alumni Shankar Nethralaya has ever seen. And for the last 20 years, he has been practicing and moving through different aspects of administrative cadre in the Kerala Society of Ophthalmic Surgeons, from journal editor, scientific committee chairman, and currently he's secretary. He has to his credit more than 30 international publications, and his forte is to find out newer conundrums in OCT. No better person than Mahesh Gopalakrishnan to tell us about OCT interpretation. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Gopal, for that nice words. So, is the screen visible, Rajiv?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's visible.
Yeah. Thank you, Meena Madam, Gopal, Rajiv, and KSOS for giving me an opportunity here. I selected OCT because this is an important topic for postgraduate, and nowadays a lot of medical retina specialists are using OCT for managing cases. And over 15 years, we have seen a lot of improvement in the OCT, and it is important to update each person, each medical retina specialist regarding the newer findings in OCT and how it changed our management. And this is my slide is not moving. Slide is not moving, I think. Yeah. So this is the presentation flow. Initially, I will start with some basics and trivia, and then some basics about interpretation, what is normal. Then I have divided the diseases into vitreomacular interface diseases, intraretinal changes mainly in diabetic retinopathy, then other AMD going into pachychoroid and CSR. And then my favorite topic, subtle changes that you should not miss. There are a few cases I will show you, and top mistakes seen in my practice. This is A to Z, and I am not covering G, that is glaucoma, because it is not my area. And I have used grayscale and not false color coded images. The green images I am not using, because the grayscale gives you maximum clarity for OCT. So this is OCT to ophthalmologist is just like a stethoscope to physician. This we have heard in many places, because without OCT, a retina practice cannot sustain. In fact, in some injection clinics and medical retina clinics outside India, they do OCT as a routine checkup, just like refraction. Then only doctor will see the patient. And this is now more important in cataract surgery also, because cataract surgeons want 6x6 vision with best quality. They cannot miss anything in the macula. So OCT is just like a stethoscope, and we just can't do away without it. And the principle of OCT is just similar to that of ultrasound. What happens when the sound wave goes and hits a medium, it gets reflected. It is collected by the transducer, and depending on the density interfaces, the reflectivity changes and the transducer displays it on a screen. So this is ultrasound. If you replace ultrasound by laser light, it becomes OCT. So it is analogous to ultrasound. This is a MCQ question. It is based on Michelson's interferometer. I am not the person to explain the physics about it, but there is a laser source which is directed towards the tissue, and it gets reflected. There are mirrors in it, and depending on the reflectivity, it is displayed on the screen as interference fringe pattern. So this is the basic principles of Michelson's interferometer, which is used in OCT. And if you see the history of OCT, it started in 90s. A lot of work went in MIT under a lot of doctors, especially Pugliafito, great people, and they first patented the OCT, and later it was given to Carl Zeiss. Carl Zeiss gave the first OCT 1000 marketed in 1996, and later it became OCT 2000, and then time domain OCT of Carl Zeiss called Stratus. We mostly started using Stratus in 2004-2005 time, and later the better quality ones came, that is spectral OCT or Fourier domain or spectral OCT, whatever, and then swept source OCT. Why OCT became so popular? Because it is non-invasive. Till that time we had only angiogram, which is an invasive procedure. It is non-contact. It is no radiation. There is no radiation in it, so it is very safe. How much of time you repeat. So that, because of all these things, it become very popular. And so what I just want to comment on one important thing, that is time domain and spectral domain OCT. Even now, a lot of people are using time domain OCT, even though currently the standard is spectral domain OCT. The time domain OCT is slow. Actually, the line acquisition is very slow, and because there are the mirrors, and it depends on the movement of the mirror, so mechanical delay is there. While spectral domain OCT is much faster with a high A-scan speed of 20,000 per second, and B-scan time is also extremely fast. So in effect, what happens? The axial resolution is extremely high, even up to 1 microns you can see, and also the artifacts, motion artifacts, etc., are very less in spectral domain OCT. It uses near infrared wavelength. Histopathology of normal macula, all of us know, 10 layers at macula, 4 layers. Everything can be seen crystal clear in a spectral domain OCT. So normal OCT, and it is just called optical biopsy because all the layers are there, and you can each layer, each photoreceptor probably you can see with OCT. So this is the fovea, and sometimes I use the negative contrast of the grayscale to see some of the layers better. So this is the fovea, and you can see the internal limiting membrane here, and retinal blood vessels can be seen as dots in the retina, mainly in the inner retina. The retinal vessels can be seen. If you ask me, if I ask you, can you tell which is the nasal side and which is the temporal side? You see the internal limiting membrane is very thick here. So this is the nasal side. Towards the disc, it is more thick, while towards the temporal side, it is thin. So if I give you a picture, you can tell which is the temporal and which is nasal without any mark. Now, there are different important layers in the retina that we always look for. One is called external limiting membrane. So where is the external limiting membrane? This is the external limiting membrane, this dark area. And just below that is inner segment of photoreceptor. Then the dark one you see is the IS-OS junction, which is the junction between outer segment and inner segment. So it is called IS-OS junction. Later it is called ellipsoid line, EZ, ellipsoid line. Then beyond that is the outer segment of photoreceptors, this white area. And then is the retinal photoreceptors, retinal pigment epithelium, and the Bruch's complex. So these are the important layers. So ELM, IS-OS junction or ellipsoid junction, and retinal pigment epithelium. These are the most important lines that you should look for in an OCT. So IS-OS junction is here, ellipsoid line is there, ISOS, ellipsoid, and RP Bruch's complex. These are the three lines that you should always look for in a OCT. So later we had new developments like enhanced depth imaging, where the deeper layers of choroid also could be made out. And in choroid, you can see the choriocapillaries close to the Bruch's membrane, very small vessels, then medium vessels called satellars, and large vessels called halars. These are all came to the pathophysiology of many diseases called pachychoroid diseases. So now even in OCT, we look for choroid as an important thing. So these are the main focus of areas that we should look for. Rule 1 is never interpret an OCT with one printout. A lot of patients come with a single printout showing this is the OCT scan. The scan line may be somewhere above or below the fovea. It is extremely difficult. So when you give a printout to the patient, you just make sure that you give a printout where there is a relevant clinical finding. Otherwise, it has to be repeated unnecessarily. So you need multiple sections through the scan. And just like ultrasound, you should not interpret based on one single picture. So just like that, you need multiple levels, and this is best if the ophthalmologist himself or herself does the scan and does the OCT and interpret. Many times the technician does, and we will get a printout and we may miss an important finding. So interpret with all the sections. So first few things that I want to discuss is the scan, determine the scan quality. This is a picture. The upper part is clear, the lower part is not very clear, mainly because the patient's eye is not in position, little away from the chin rest. So all this can affect the scan quality. So make sure the scan quality is good. Then overall profile of the retina you can see. Then the serous macular detachment, all this stuff, you know what is you are looking at. Then look at the fovea, the foveal contour. Your section has fovea or not. So if you have the fovea, then that is the central cut. Then you can consider all the other findings. Now this is a perfect section. All the layers are there. Even choroid is visible. All crystal clear. So make sure the quality is good. Now do not forget to note the scan plane. If you see this upper picture, it's a tributary vein occlusion. The upper picture has a line here, and that area has edema. And this is the fovea. In fact, fovea has a lot of edema here, and this is a lower part. Suppose the patient comes only with this photo, you will not see there is edema in the fovea. So you need all the sections. There are terminologies used in OCT: irregularity, fragmentation, rupture, interruption, depression, elevation, like that. Need not be always very strict about all this. Systematic procedure, I will give you one example, and after that I will go to all the cases. So this is identify the retinal pigment epithelium, examine the retinal pigment epithelium, examine posterior to the retinal pigment epithelium, examine anterior to the retinal pigment epithelium. So this systematic method, you will not miss anything. I will give one example. This is the OCT, and this is the retinal pigment epithelium. And here there is a shallow PED raised here, and there is no irregularity anywhere. So one single elevation, PED, undulating PED, no interruption. Now go to the second step. Posterior to RP. Posterior to RP is not much. These are all large choroidal vessels. Nothing much in that. But anterior to the RP, there are a lot of findings. Like these are the large cystoid changes, small cystoid changes. There is gross alteration in the foveal contour. There is a pre-retinal, pre-RP hyperreflective area. There are dots in the retina, which are the hard exudates in the retina. And in fact, the most important ELM and ellipsoid line is disrupted over this area. So if you go like this, you will not miss any finding in the OCT. So this is RP, posterior to RP, anterior to RP. Now I have divided the disease into different topics. First, I will deal with vitreomacular interface diseases, which we come across quite often. Why you should know the pathology of each disease, then only you will understand the OCT also. There is a liquefaction and gel contraction of vitreous gel in every person with aging. If there is an anomalous vitreous liquefaction, but it is not separated from the retina, there will be abnormal traction at the retinal tissue, leading to vitreomacular interface diseases. So it is an anomaly. There is an anomaly between the liquefaction and separation of the gel. Now, the first term that I would like to use is VMA. These terms I am giving based on the International Vitreomacular Traction Study Group classification. Very simple, very simple. It is called VMA. So VMA means there is vitreous is adherent to the fovea, but there is no distortion of foveal contour. It is called a focal VMA. You can see the vitreous, it is adherent to the fovea, but foveal contour is reasonably good. So it is a small focal VMA, and sometimes a large VMA may be there. From here to here, the vitreous is adherent. So it is diffuse VMA. This is focal, and this is concurrent vitreomacular adhesion, where there is an underlying disease like an AMD. These are the three terms in VMA. Not very important, but this is important. Vitreomacular traction. When there is a vitreomacular adhesion with the traction on the retina with foveal contour distortion, it is called vitreomacular traction, VMT. So there is a distortion of foveal surface, at least in one section. It can be small, focal, one area, or a broad. I will show you some examples. This is a focal VMT. The vitreous is coming and attaching and pulling. This is a focal VMT. And this is another focal VMT. And what happens if it increases? It becomes a macular hole. So full thickness macular hole is an anatomic defect in the fovea. There is a disruption in all the layers. So some of you may be remembering the classification of macular hole. It is a little complicated, but this IVTS classification is quite simple. So it divides it into small, medium, large. There are three types of macular hole: small, less than 250. Which is the 250? It is the gap between the minimum gap between the two edges. So it is a minimum linear diameter. Less than 250, 250 to 400 is medium, and this is large. And you have to say whether there is VMT or without VMT. In these first two pictures, already traction is relieved. So it is without VMT. In the original classification, it was stage 4. So this is how it is classified. So it is a primary medium-sized macular hole with VMT. This is primary medium-sized macular hole without VMT. Very simple classification. It is IVTS currently accepted as the most important tool. Now coming to lamellar macular hole. This is a partial thickness loss of tissue. I will tell you there are two types of lamellar macular hole. One is called degenerative. The other one is tractional. Tractional macular hole has an ERM, while degenerative macular hole does not have an ERM. So both are partial thickness. It will not be extending through the full thickness. Clinically, you can make out this because in full thickness macular hole, even if it is small, vision will be 612, 618 or less. Lamellar macular hole, even if clinically it looks scary, vision may be 6/9. So clinically also you can correlate with that, some clinical clues. So this is the first one. You can see the epiretinal membrane here, and there is a macular hole, partial thickness macular hole. This is a tractional macular hole, and this is a degenerative macular hole. There is no ERM, and it's a W-shaped inside partial thickness lamellar hole. In these cases, recently another term has been described: lamellar hole associated epiretinal proliferation. There is some thickening in this area, LHEP. So that is a recent term used in lamellar holes. The theoretical thing is here surgical treatment may be possible, here it may not be possible, even though lamellar hole surgery is a big question. Now there is something called macular pseudohole. It is always associated with an epiretinal membrane. Clinically, you will see a red dot, and you can see there is no loss of tissue. The retinal tissue is heaped up at the junction. You will see this area as red area in the clinical. So macular pseudohole usually will have very good vision, 6/9, 6/6 like that. Now coming to epiretinal membrane. Why epiretinal membrane comes? Because after PVD, the vitreous may be adherent to the retinal surface because of schisis, and it proliferates. It is called epiretinal membrane. This is an epiretinal membrane of you can see this ERM, and these are all different sections of the another epiretinal membrane. Through this section, very bad epiretinal membrane and grossly thickened retina. This is another one. So here and all, you can see the entire architecture of the retina is lost due to the epiretinal membrane chronic effect. So sometimes you do a surgery and it may not improve much because even now the architecture is not normal. The inner layers are all not normal. So this is important even in cataract surgery. If this was a case where the ERM was noted initially, foveal contour was okay. So he underwent cataract surgery, later vision worsened. You can see that it has become worse after cataract surgery. So you can tell the patient with OCT that there could be a possibility of worsening. So OCT is important even in cataract surgery aspect. Now coming to the most important, one of the most important topic, that is DME, diabetic macular edema. Diabetic macular edema, all of us know that it is classified into center sparing and center involving DME. This is a case of center sparing. If you know not the thickening, it is normal, but there is a paracentrally, there is cystoid changes. Why this is important? You can see the color, the representation also. Why this is important is these cases we give laser rather than injection in center sparing DME based on ETDRS protocols. Now this is another center sparing DME. You can see a succinate in the color photo, and fovea is literally spared, and there are some microaneurysms in this area. So this is center sparing DME. The importance of this is before cataract surgery. If you are going to do a cataract surgery, after this, the center sparing will become center involving in most of the cases. So this has to be dealt with before cataract surgery or along with cataract surgery with a pre-cataract surgery laser or intravitreal injection, so that it doesn't become center involving soon. Now, the most important finding is spongiform edema. It is sponge-like swelling present in the outer retina. You can see this area, whole area is thickened. This is spongiform edema, which is seen in diabetic macular edema. And there is cystoid macular edema, large cystoid spaces. It can be in different layers. And the cystoid usually happens in chronic macular edema as well as when there is an associated ischemia. You can see this is cystoid changes here. This is a large cystoid edema in DME. Now, the most important other finding is serous macular detachment or serous subretinal fluids, serous retinal detachment. Subretinal fluid at the fovea or SMD, serous macular detachment, is seen in 15%. Even though most of the DME has a mixture of all these things, it is seen in 15%. The advantage of, or the good thing about this serous detachment is it responds well to this intravitreal injection with a good prognosis of vision. But always when there is serous detachment, make sure about underlying hypertension or even nephropathy, because these can cause severe serous detachment. Now this is examples of serous detachment here, serous macular subfoveal detachment here, and here subfoveal detachment. And if you see the infrared picture, these white dots are in fact hard oxydates. Okay, so this is another serous detachment, and they all respond well to injections in most of the cases. Now comes the other one, that is VM, vitreomacular interface abnormality associated with DME. These are cases which don't do well with injection. You can see this is the macular edema and there is a flat ERM hyaloid over it. And these sort of cases, how much ever injection you give, it is unlikely to respond like other macular edema which responds. So this ultimately may need surgical intervention also. So this vitreomacular interface abnormality in DME is a surgical indication. This is another case of DME with the vitreomacular traction, and even in fact, if laser and injections can worsen this, so this finding is also important when treating DME cases. Hard oxidate at fovea. This is another finding. Sometimes you can see large hard oxidate bang at the fovea. The visual prognosis is quite bad. Many of us treat with, when there is a lot of lipids in the macula, this hard oxidate in the macula, we treat with steroids rather than anti-VEGF. Even though the hard oxidate disappear, the outcome, visual outcome may not be that good because of RP atrophy. So this is hard oxidate. And then comes ischemic macula. Many cases where there is unexplained visual loss, there could be an underlying ischemia, like this case. where Opta is a very simple tool for diagnosis of macular ischemia, but that is not included in this talk. And in the initial cases, you will get a large cystoid area corresponding to ischemia, and later it becomes atrophy. These also are not very good candidates for intravitreal injections and laser. The prognosis is little bad. Now there are some OCT biomarkers in DME. These biomarkers are findings in OCT that will help you to prognosticate your case. That is, you will know which is going to do well. You can tell which is not going to do that well. Like that. I will give you some examples. One is called drill. Disorganization of retinal inner layers is called drill. Till now, I have been talking about outer layers, ELM, RPE, EZ, etc. No, this is inner layer. So disorganized inner layer is it's a poor prognostic finding. If I show this textbook picture, which is a better macula, this is a better macula, or this is a better macula. In fact, this looks better, but this is actually the outcome is better, because if you see all the layers, inner layers, you can trace the outer plexiform, in outer nuclear, all this you can trace. But here you can't trace a single layer. So in fact, this is better than this. So drill is present in this area. You can't see any continuity of these layers. So this has a poorer prognosis than this one when you treat. So drill is one finding that you should look for when you give injection. Then there is something called pearl necklace sign. Just a name. What you can see this hard X-rays. These are the hyperreflective dots inside the cyst or along the subretinal fluid. So the importance is when they become dry, when the fluid goes, this will all precipitate in that area. So there is a chance of hard X-ray migration to the fovea in these cases. Like this. This is a case when treated with injection, just see the hard X-ray got precipitated. This is a hard X-ray precipitation with reduced backscattering, complete blocked. This is another case of after treatment anti-VEGF. It has become like this. Even though edema gone, you can see all these hard X-ray clumps in the retina. So this sign is important in prognosticating. Then there are hyperreflective foci. Already I have told it is corresponding to either hard X-rays or some of the macrophages, all these things. So that it also has a not very good prognosis, and many of these cases we prefer steroids rather than anti-VEGF injection. Like these are the cases with lot of hard X-ray pre-treatment, post-treatment, pre-treatment, post-treatment. So these are cases which we use steroids for. And most important in DME, we should look for the ellipsoid and ELM. You can see in this picture, from here to here, there is no ellipsoid zone or ELM. So this is a poor prognosis case. Whatever, how much ever injection you give, it is not going to improve much. And sometimes you can make out the level of hemorrhage also in diabetic retinopathy. In fact, this hemorrhage is not subhyaloid, it is a subhyalum. So these are some of my thoughts in DME. Now I will come to a more difficult topic, OCT in wet AMD. I will start with wet AMD, go to PCV and CSR, because all these are in a same spectrum. All of you know that there are two types of CNVM, mainly three types, but type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is under the retinal pigment epithelium. Type 2 is in front of the retinal pigment epithelium. So pre-RPE and sub-RPE. So this is a RPE, and here is a CNVM complex, which is under the, it is type 1. Here is an RPE, and CNVM complex is in front of the retina, it is type 2. So these are the two types of CNVM that we come across usually. And when we treat wet AMD, I am not going to the clinical signs, but there are specific findings in OCT that will tell you which one will do well, which one will not. There are signs of activity, and there are signs of inactivity, which does not require any intervention. Like signs of activity include subretinal fluid, intraretinal fluid, neovascular complex, fibroscler PED and hemorrhagic PED. And there are chronic changes, outer retinal tubulations, scar thinning, geographic atrophy, etc., which give you poor prognosis after treatment. You can even stop injections. So this is a case through this area. When I scan, this is a pre-retinal hyperreflective complex, which is a CNVM. I told it is type 2 CNVM with intraretinal edema. This is a case where the RP is going like this. It's a PED. I will talk about the PED in detail later, and you can see underlying choroid to some extent. So it is not hemorrhagic PED. Hemorrhagic PED, the below one you can see, nothing is visible underneath. So this is a fibroscler PED and this is a hemorrhagic PED. It's intraretinal fluid and pre-RP complex. So these are the active signs of CNVM. Now, there are some chronic changes. This is a large pre-RP hyperreflective complex, but there is no edema. It's a scar. It's basically a scar. And you can see this round area where the retinal photoreceptors are rounded up like that. It is called outer retinal tubulation. It looks like a cystoid edema, but it is towards the outer segment. So this is sign of chronicity, may not do well. So these are some of the ORT or outer retinal tubulations. You can see these round areas. So these are signs of chronicity. Now I will come to the different types of pigment epithelial detachment seen in AMD. You see PED only in AMD, PCV, and CSCR usually. These are the commonest diseases where you see PED, not in any other diseases usually. So pigment epithelial detachments are of different types, and serous PED is standard characteristically seen in central serous retinopathy. This is a CSCR case with large serous detachment and a small clear area. It's a small PED. The pigment epithelial detachment can be traced like this, and it's a PED. And you can see that underlying there is no reduced backscattering. So this is a PED and this is serous detachment. Now coming to hemorrhagic PED, usually seen in polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy or some other cases of age-related macular degeneration. And this is a large hemorrhagic PED, and this causes the reduced backscattering, blockage below underneath this. You don't see any choroidal details. Now fibroscler PED is there in wet AMD. Here there will be some hyperreflective area under the top of the retinal pigment epithelium, and you can see to some extent the choroid. So it is not completely blocking like a hemorrhagic PED. I will give some more examples. This is a fibroscler PED. The pigment epithelium you can trace like this. This is and underneath there is hyperreflective area suggestive of choroidal neovascular membrane, and you can see the choroid. So this is a fibroscler PED. This is another fibroscler PED. Here you can see one fibroscler. Here you can see fibroscler PED. There are drusenoid PED corresponding to a lot of drusen inside, and they are all having high risk of developing wet AMD and loss of vision with aging. So here there is already some activity at the fovea with some fluid. This is called dome-shaped. You can classify PED based on shape also. This is dome-shaped. It's another hemorrhagic PED, usually seen in PCV. Then there is something called irregular or notched PED. Here you can see a PED like this, and there is a small notch here. Usually at this notch, you will get a polyp. That is, when you correlate ICG along with OCT. So most of the times we are correct based on OCT itself. You can find out where the polyp is. So this is a notched PED. This is what is called tall peaked PED and thumb leg PED. This is another characteristic finding in a polyp. So you can see this thumb-shaped PED with hyperreflectivity underneath the RPE, and this is typical of a polyp harboring a polyp. The thumb leg PED is one that is important. This is another thumb leg PED. You can have this thumb leg PED with a polyp inside, and this area has a shallow PED. This is what I call, what every retina specialist will call, is double layer sign. I will come to that later. This is a very important sign. This is another thumb leg PED, and along with thumb leg PED, this whole area, retinal pigment epithelium and bracts are separated. with a hyperreflective area in between. Usually, this will have a type 1 network inside this choroidal neovascular membrane. So this is called double layer sign, where there is a separation between RPE and BRUX. Understand? So this is a double layer sign, and this is a wrinkled PED, sometimes post-treatment, and it is called extra large. Another type of PED called extra large PED, usually seen in polyp. This is a huge PED, and ICG you can see a bunch of polyps. Usually these are not seen in AMD routinely. Then there is something called multi-layered PED. Inside the PED there are multiple lamellae. Okay, so this is one of the chronic PEDs, and you can see the wrinkling here, and under that there is hyperreflective area, and below that there is a cleft, then choroid. So this triple layer sign is there, and in fact this doesn't do that bad. They maintain a reasonably good vision without much activity, because this choroidal neovascular membrane complex acts as a source of oxygen to the retinal pigment epithelium, and acts as a surrogate, so that this is not a very bad sign. So this is another a case. I will give an example of AMD. This is a, you can see cystoid edema, that spongiform edema, cystoid edema here with serous macular detachment and a pre-RPE hyperreflective complex, especially in this area. You can see pre-RPE hyperreflective complex, and all these cases we see the choroid. It is a thin choroid, ruling out probably a PCV and pachychoroid disease. So if you do an angio in this, you can see that classic membrane that is fuzzy, the lacy pattern, which is increasing in late phase with fuzzy margins, corresponding to the pre-RPE hyperreflective complex I just showed in this picture. So this is a classic CNVM or type 2 CNVM, and you can once you do the angio, diagnose and then treat, the follow-up can be done with OCT. This is pre-treatment and this is post-treatment. You can see the intraretinal edema has gone, and even the layers are regenerating to some extent. This is cystoid edema is also gone. So different sections. Always check all the sections. I am repeatedly telling this because a lot of times we have seen mistakes because of that. So here the central area has fluid. Suppose the patient comes with only one line which is dry, you will miss the fluid. So when AMD, especially in AMD, you should see all the sections so that you don't miss any signs of activity and delay treatment based on wrong judgment. Now coming to type 3. Type 3 is otherwise called retinal angiomatous proliferation. Here we see what is called trapezoid PED, pigmentability, and there is a gap in the area. This is called erosion side. Actually, the retinal vessels grow into the sub-RPE through this area, and you will see a lot of clinical hemorrhages clinically visible with more intraretinal changes. More intraretinal changes. Rajim. So in this case, when you do the OCT, I mean the ICG, you can see the hyperreflective dot in the center, which is the characteristic finding in hotspot in RAP. So these are some of the findings, and this is erosion sign that I already explained. And sometimes you can get RP tear in PCV and AMD. Here, if you see the RP, it is broken here till here. There is no RP, and that area is seen as a denuded area. So that is RP tear. And over time, ultimately, it all causes regression of scarring, and this is a proper scar in wet AMD, which we would not want to see in many cases. Just one finding I will tell you. Different from drusen, I have shown on drusenoid PED. There is a finding called reticular pseudodrusen, where it is subretinal. The small hyperreflective area in this area, it is subretinal along with a thin choroid. Actually, reticular pseudodrusen is more associated with RAP, retinal angiomatous proliferations, and this can be a predisposing factor in many cases. So reticular fluid drusen should not be missed in, especially in RAP cases, which is a diagnostic point in favor of RAP. Finally, in something in dry AMD, ultimately many of them causes atrophy of the retinal layers with increased backscattering like this, and RP foveal atrophy. So this, till now we don't have any treatment for dry AMD. A lot of things are going on, and I have to talk something about enhanced depth imaging also. In the top picture, you can see that the retina is clearly seen. But in enhanced depth imaging, you see more of choroid than retina. Here the choroid is not very visible. Here the choroid is more visible. So more of choroid than visible. Enhanced depth imaging is a program a lot of OCT machines are having, and this helps you to identify the choroid. And there are new diseases called pachychoroid diseases based on the enhanced depth imaging. Pachychoroid diseases is a spectrum of diseases starting from CSR to PCV, and the inflammations also causes thick choroid. Thin choroid is seen in usually AMD, myopia, and retinitis pigmentosa. Now, subsource OCT is another new modality which uses faster scanning methods with longer wavelength with excellent details under the RP. And if you see this, this is a textbook picture with the cataract and lot of hazy view, but you see the subsource OCT, the clear, you can up to the sclera, you can see clearly. This is another case where there is a large subretinal hemorrhage, and through the subretinal hemorrhage, under the OCT, under the choroid, you can see all the details in the subretinal hemorrhage. So subsource OCT has also revolutionized many of the findings in choroid. So coming to pachychoroid spectrum, pachychoroid disease is a spectrum of diseases starting from pachychoroid pigment epitheliopathy to PCV. It's a spectrum of diseases, and pachychoroid pigment epitheliopathy doesn't have any fluid, only pigment modeling, and no evidence of CSCR. The second one is central serous chorioretinopathy, where there is clear fluid under the retina. Third one is pachychoroid neovasculopathy, that is type 1 choroidal neovascular membrane under the RPE. Many of them are identified with OCTA, OCT angiogram. And the last one is large choroidal vessels like polyps. So this is a spectrum of pachychoroid eye diseases. And this is a case of PCV. You can see some in the ICG angiogram, some polyps here. And in the OCT, this area has a large polyp corresponding to the polyp. So now I will explain what is double layer sign. Double layer sign is a gap between hyperreflective RP band and hyperreflective remainder of Bruch's membrane. There is a gap. So this is a double layer sign. You can see this is a retinal pigment epithelium and Bruch's membrane is yellow arrow, and in between it is clear. So it is called hyporeflective double layer sign, and hyporeflective double layer sign is usually seen in central serous retinopathy. While this is another case where there is a hyperreflective double layer sign. Hyperreflective double layer sign is usually seen in polypoidal choroidal vasculopathy and PCN, pachychoroid neovasculopathy. So in that hyperreflective area under the RP, there will be type 2, type 1 choroidal neovascular membrane. So this is an example. This is a hyperreflective double layer sign, this area. This is the Bruch's and this is the RP. So this is hyperreflective double layer. In that area, you may see a network suggestive of choroidal neovascular membrane. Okay, this is another case. And in fact, the double layer sign size may be seen in periodic follow-up increasing depending on the growth of the choroidal neovascular membrane. So it can be used as a follow-up tool also, lateral elongation. Now, even in CSR, when we follow up, the choroid thickening is found to be changing. So when the CSR reduces, central serous retinopathy, the fluid reduces, the choroidal thickness gradually increases, and suppose it worsens, the choroidal thickness can vary. So this is CSR also is related to the pachychoroid eye disease. So just a few thoughts in pachychoroid eye disease, and this is one bad case of chronic CSR. You can don't think that always you will see the CSR as a serous detachment. This is a chronic case where you can see a lot of hard X-rays and pigmentation, and this is a bad fundus autofluorescence with a hyperreflective area, and you just can lot of schisis, that is the in between the layers of Muller's cell, the retina is stretched, and there is schisis like picture in this area, leading to large cystoid changes. Even if you treat, like this is pre-treatment and this is post-treatment, X-ray have gone, but just see that choroid retina is totally atrophic. So this sort of degenerative central serous retinopathy doesn't carry good prognosis. So these are some of the findings in chronic CSCF. And there is one finding called posterior cystoid retinal degeneration. Here you can see some cystoid retinal degeneration in the posterior layers of retina, which also is not a good prognosis case. It is a sign of chronicity, and the outcome may not be very good. Now coming to the OCT in other diseases, mainly inflammatory diseases, we do use OCT. The choroidal thickness is the one that we monitor. Choroidal thickness can be increased in classically in VKH or any other choroiditis. In VKH, you can see that large serous detachment in multiple loculated area, and the choroid total architecture is gone. You can't see any vessels or anything like that. Choroidal architecture is gone, and this is a VKH case. And based on the choroidal thickening, you can monitor your treatment response, like when to stop steroid, taper steroid. The activity can be monitored based on the choroidal thickness. So choroidal thickness is extremely useful in monitoring the management of VKH and similar choroiditis. Myopic CNVM is another. This is a myopic CNVM case. You can very thin choroid you can see, and there is a pre-RP hyperreflective complex. And in myopic CNVM, characteristically, there won't be edema, subretinal fluid, all these findings like a ordinary CNVM. Many times the patient will give the complaint that he will be complaining about the metamorphopsia, very little fluid in this area, but hardly any change. And in fact, we used to be telling the fluorescein angiogram is the best method to identify myopic CNVM because it shows fuzzy CNVM. And now Octa has been able to pick out network in these sort of cases. So OCT doesn't give much clue in myopic CNVM, even though it is okay for a follow-up. Central retinal vein occlusion and branch retinal vein occlusion, standard, we always get cases. Just make sure the central macular thickness, you're seeing the right plane, and your treatment is based on vision and central macular thickness. So this is a central retinal vein occlusion, massive edema. The picture you see, it is looking like a ischemic center CRV. Central retinal artery occlusion, when you see clinical picture, you will see whitening of retina due to edema, and there is a cherry red spot. That whitening is inner retinal whitening here. You can see that it is corresponding to the inner retina whitening. This is sometimes if the cataract is too much, you are not able, and patient comes after 3-4 days. OCT is a good tool, so that you can do an OCT and see that this whitening. Then you can say sudden loss of vision. This could be a CRI. So after 4 or 5 days, this whitening will disappear. So this is a useful tool, I feel, in central retinal artery occlusion. This is a post-trauma choroidal rupture. Infrared is showing choroidal rupture. There is a discontinuity of choroid. Now I will come to few findings, very subtle findings, but it can be mistaken for standard that I have come across in the last few years. What do you see in a color photo? You can see a yellowish lesion here, and looks like a drusen or something like the central area. But if you show just the OCT, it looks like a classic CNVM, pre-RP hyperreflective complex. What is important here is there is no edema at all. There is no intraretinal edema in this area in both eyes. And when you do angiogram, there is no leak. So it is not a choroidal neovascular membrane. And this fundus autofluorescence will give you the clue. It is adult onset foveal vitelliform dystrophy. So long time back, I have seen cases which were treated with anti-VEGF, thinking that this is a, based on OCT, this is a CNVM. So there is no edema. and angiogram is not showing any leak, and autofluorescence is characteristic, AOFVD, which we should not miss. This is another case. Right eye looks quite okay. There are some tessellated fundus in the fundus case, fundus in one side. And this is OCT of left eye. What does it look like? It looks like a typical serous macular detachment or a central serous retinopathy. Don't come to the conclusion very soon, because in this section, that is the fourth section, in a vertical scan, it looks like a central serous retinopathy. While in the horizontal scan, you can see that there is a dome-shaped macula. So we are dealing with something called DSM, dome-shaped macula. In many of these cases, there will be little fluid at the under the fovea due to the differences in the choroidal perfusion. So there are a lot of theories regarding that, but this cannot be treated just like a CSCR. So it is not a CSCR, it's a dome-shaped macula. The take-home message here is you should have horizontal as well as vertical sections before concluding all this. Clinically itself, in that case, if you see that the tessellations were more in this side rather than this side. So there is a curve like that. So this and all you can go back and see later, but always use vertical and horizontal sections so that you don't miss this sort of finding. Now coming to another favorite topic. What do you see in the color photo? Some whitening in the perifoveal region. So it is mactal. It is mactal, some crystalline deposits. There are very subtle findings in mactal. Many of them are referred as ARMD, wet ARMD, like that. So it is, first of all, understand that in mactal, there is no macular edema. The foveal contour is reasonably normal. It is a degenerative condition, not an exudative condition. So the macular edema is not there, and it is the foveal contour is maintained. And what you see as pseudocyst is not actual edema. And when you enlarge the picture, you can see a lot of changes. There is ellipsoid disruption and ELM disruption, all these cases. I will show some more findings of mactal. These are hyporeflective areas in the area. Pseudocyst, ILM draping can be seen, and foveal atrophy is commonly seen in these cases. There is a collapse sign. Actually, the inner layers come to the retinal pigment epithelium. They fall on the retinal pigment epithelium. Collapse sign. These are all findings in mactal. Microstructural. These are all, another ellipsoid and ISOS all gone in this area, and many of them still they may have reasonably good vision, 618, N8, like that, not very bad, and the progression is extremely slow. It is important to identify this condition and avoid unnecessary treatment in many of these cases. So this is collapse sign, and pigment dispersion sign is another sign. Some of the hyperreflective dots are there in the inner retina, and they are predisposing factors to pigmentation. Later they will develop pigmentation in the parafoveal region. So these are some of the findings. Now coming to another finding, this is case number 4, defective vision. In single section of dense scan, you can see a discontinuity of ISOS and ELM and the ISOS in the fovea. All other sections, only in dense scan you will get this sort of change. This is outer retinal microhole. This can be missed easily in time domain OCT as well as spectral OCT if you do in a different level. So this is if the patient's vision is affected, make sure. This sort of picture can be sporadic, can be hereditary, or can be seen in other conditions like solar retinopathy. You can see the little more, the history will be there, it will be bilateral usually, solar retinopathy and Welder's maculopathy. Now coming to another interesting case, this is a young fellow, defective vision, 1 day duration, and fluorescein angiogram, nothing much, some mild pigment mottling at them. But the OCT finding is very typical. There is ellipsoid disruption at this area, there is ELM disruption, there is hyperreflective area under the fovea, and this is very typical of retinal pigment, acute retinal pigment epitheliitis. It can be idiopathic post-viral manifestation. Usually, this is a self-limiting disease, even though we give some steroids and they improve like this. This is pre-treatment and post-treatment, and they regenerate the So this is a pigment epitheliitis, and after 2 months, this looks normal. So very subtle finding. You need spectral OCT and you need careful observation so that this is not missed. Mutes is another thing which is more visible in fundus autofluorescence, and the corresponding OCT, you can see that ellipsoid and ELM. Ellipsoid is totally disrupted. A lot of areas of ellipsoid disruption. This also has mild colds with recovery. There are some inflammatory conditions. I am not going into the details. This is acute retinal pigment epitheliitis, central area. I showed the first case. Then there is APM-BPE, which is more diagnosed with angiogram. And there are acute macular mononeuropathy and unilateral acute idiopathic maculopathy. One without the UAIM has edema, the other one doesn't have edema. This is a very, depending on the area of edema, you can diagnose in OCT. So, tributary vein occlusion is the one that we almost always miss. Very small, subtle changes at the fovea, and in fact, small area of cystoid in one area, one side of, and angiogram is more useful in these cases. Cystoid area, one small area. This can be seen in early diabetic macular edema also. So you have to do a careful angiogram and octa to find out whether there is a tributary vein. And this is another case, interesting case, where there is a finding. This, if you see the paracentral area at the fovea and at the side of the paracentral area, there is a middle layer shows thickening. It is called paracentral acute middle maculopathy, PAMM. This can be a primary inflammatory disease, or it can be seen in secondary vascular diseases. So PAMM is another. So I started saying that ELM, IS, ISOS and RP are most important. Now I am telling all the layers are having some findings, and we are learning more and more from OCT. So this is PAMM, and one important difference is this is a PAMM and this is a cotton wool spot. Cotton wool spot is in nerve fiber layer and this is in the middle layer. So that is the important difference between PAM and cotton wool spot. And most important, don't overlook the diagnosis. This looks like a standard central serous, diabetic retinopathy. Lot of X-ray, heart X-ray, everything. This is the other eye, angiogram picture, microaneurysms and leaking. This classical diabetic retinopathy. But in OCT, left eye has a large serous detachment, which is out of proportion. Usually in diabetic macular edema, you see very little serous detachment. Here you see a lot of diabetic serous detachment, so which is unusual. And this fundus autofluorescence shows something like a CSCR. So central serous retinopathy like picture can be there in diabetic retinopathy, which can be, there can be an overlap of diseases, sometimes precipitated due to nephropathy or high BP, or sometimes an association between these two. The treatment is little different. Sometimes you can laser a small leak and this will improve, and control the systemic disease like hypertension, nephropathy, and this will improve. So don't overlook all DMEs or DMEs. Now this is another interesting case where there is a hard X-ray, typical DME, but you can see some pigmentation at the fovea, and this is having maculotelangiectasia or juxtafoveal or parafoveal telangiectasia associated with DME. The mistake what we commit is, here you can't go with the central macular thickness just like any other DME, because the central area will be having always degenerative changes and atrophy. This is a case of PDR with MACTEL. You can see the pigmentation at the fovea. It's a PDR with MACTEL. So vision cannot be, vision or just macular OCT cannot be taken as a guideline for treatment. Now, where we go wrong, with this I will finish. Don't interpret based on one printout. Repeatedly I am telling, because a lot of cases we have seen the diagnosis missed. So don't one printout, don't make. If possible, sit with the patient and the OCT and go through all the sections and see. Every OCT does not need an injection. This is important, because I have shown the chronic changes in DME, AMD and all, which don't benefit by injection, like chronic scarred CNVM, and I have shown some other finding, AOFBD, which looks like CNVM but doesn't require any injection. So just remember, every OCT does not need an injection. Don't miss subtle findings. I have shown clearly there are n number of cases which you can miss very small findings. So basically you need a spectral OCT rather than a time domain OCT to find out all these things. Central macular thickness is not everything. CMT. Don't treat the patient based on central macular thickness alone. I have one important point that I want to highlight is now a lot of HCQ screening cases are coming, and in many places the people see just the foveal thickness and say there is thinning of fovea, so HCQ can be stopped. Don't do that. So central macular thickness is not everything, especially in HCQ screening and all. You need to see layer by layer in the OCT before coming to a conclusion that there is a HCQ toxicity. And always use wisely with clinical correlation. It is there in every imaging. It is there in every radiological diagnosis. Use wisely with clinical correlation. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you, Mahesh. It was a wonderful presentation. Is Thomas online? Are there any questions? Thomas? I think he's in YouTube. It will take a little time for him to respond.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I am allowing everybody to unmute, and you can ask questions if you want. You can unmute yourself and ask questions.
Yes,
can you change the screen sharing?
Yeah, I'm here. Mahesh, thank you.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, Mahesh, excellent talk. It was a good overview of OCT.
And you can ask questions if you want. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. Thomas,
Yeah,
mute your mobile.
I'm here. Mahesh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, Mahesh, excellent talk. It was a good overview of OCT. Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
In fact, there's a question from Dr. Biju John.
Okay.
Please explain points of differentiation between a large drusenoid PED and a fibrovascular PED.
Drusenoid PED and fibrovascular PED. Okay. Yes. Drusenoid PED will be very small. Yeah, second question.
That's a question from Dr. Biju John.
Okay.
Please explain points of differentiation between a large drusenoid PED and a fibrovascular PED.
Drusenoid PED will not be very large like a fibrovascular PED. Fibrovascular PED I have shown in a lot of pictures. It is the double layer sign, and shallow fibrovascular PED is that I don't think that can be confused, because drusenoid PED will have a yellowish subretinal clinically visible lesion, and fibrovascular PED is a diffuse lesion. And large fibrovascular drusenoid PED is unlikely in many cases. I have seen. Sometimes it is little difficult whether it is having a network. The only difference that I can to make a difference, you need an octa. That is a standard thing now. Even large drusenoid PED can have a CNVM network.
Another question: how do you differentiate between hard exudate and a hyperreflective dot?
Hyperreflective dot can be due to hard exudate. Clinical correlation, fundus picture. Hyperreflective dots can be due to hard exudate. There are other causes of hyperreflective dots like macrophages and all these things, which will not be seen in fundus. So clinical and correlate with the OCT. That is the method.
Any other questions?
There is one question from Dr. Sabita.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Can you please explain the OCT finding in HCQ maculopathy and when to stop HCQ?
Yeah, that is, I expected somebody will ask that question, because it is now very commonly, we are all seeing cases like that. There are 2-3 points that I want to make. One, HCQ is a very safe drug, and the data shows that even if you take 10 years HCQ, the chance of having maculopathy is only 1% or less than 5%. So it is very rare. Sometimes what I see is some patients are go to some places, then they say there is foveal thinning and stop HCQ. They might have taken HCQ for only 5-6 months. So it is to make sure that it's HCQ, we need multiple. These cases I will do multiple evaluations. One, wide field OCT is very important. That means when the small OCT cut, you will miss ellipsoid disruption. We need to see whether there is ellipsoid disruption, that fine finding. So wide field cuts of whole macula need to be taken. Number two, fundus autofluorescence, which will not be available in many places. Number three, visual field. Make sure it is reproducible paracentral scotoma. Sometimes they will have some dark spots in field, which you can repeat the field and then tell that it may disappear. So visual field has to be clearly interpreted. OCT, wide field, and fundus autofluorescence. And still, if there is a doubt, I will do multifocal ERG, which is not available in many centers. The first two are enough. So if you have a doubt, repeat the visual field and go through all the sections, and then only come to a diagnosis that this is a possible HCQ toxicity and stop, because it has a lot of implications. Many SLE patients cannot stop HCQ.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
You showed a fundus picture of a dome-shaped macula with an OCT.
Yes.
Is the fluid in the dome-shaped macula constant, or does the fluid keep on increasing, and do you need any treatment?
Actually, there is no evidence to adequate treatment for dome-shaped macular fluid. It can vary. Some of our patients we have seen it reduces slightly, then again it comes back. In fact, I have treated with there are cases which was treated with PDT also, but it doesn't respond. The pathology is little different because it's supposed to be the high pressure from the choroidal side pushing the fluid inside. So your treatment may not work. So point one, they may not be treated because the response is not predictable. And point two, it is important to diagnose rather than anti-VEGF injection. It will not respond to anti-VEGF also.
Mahesh, there's one more question. Which is more reliable in HCQ maculopathy, HFA 10-2 or OCT or both?
I will say both Humphrey and OCT. Rajiv, can you change the this thing slideshow? I can't.
Slide and stop sharing. You just escape. Just escape will do.
Escape. Okay.
Yeah, we are able to see you. Mahesh.
Okay. Yeah. Both are important. You can't when one patient is sent for HCQ screening, you need both field and OCT at least. And in fact, based on guidelines, you need to do only this after 5 years only. After 5 years of starting HCQ only. 1 year and all, ideally don't need all these investigations. But the rheumatologist send it across for screening. So that we have to do some test and then say it is okay. So I do both field and OCT.
Okay, next question is which PED needs treatment on?
Hemorrhagic PED needs treatment. Fibrovascular PED needs treatment. Serous PED in CSR doesn't require any treatment. But otherwise, the trapezoid PED in RAP needs treatment. So I can tell only serous PED and drusenoid PED doesn't require treatment. All others require treatment.
Okay, there is.
Mahesh, in RP RIP, how do you proceed?
Yeah, RP RIP can be of two types. That is, even without treatment, it can RIP. We have seen a lot of cases. Thomas might have seen. We have seen a lot of cases where due to why RIP comes, because there is a fibrovascular element under the retinal pigment epithelium. It can contract and pull the retina, tear the retinal pigment epithelium. So it can come without any treatment also. I have seen RP RIP with injection, RP RIP with PDT, RP RIP with proper laser also. So it can come without treatment also, with treatment also. But when it comes, I think if it misses the fovea, you are saved. Otherwise, there will be dramatic loss of vision in this case. But you have to continue. If I am injecting, I will continue injection till it is dry. So RP RIP per se will not stop my treatment.
Then one more question is there. Many DME patients have poor control of DM. I think you can read also, Mahesh. How long can we wait for this patient to do DM control before any intervention? Some don't get it under control.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Yeah, practical question. Actually, you can't tell you control everything and come back. They may never get control. In fact, so simultaneously you can initiate the treatment. Very bad control, HbA1c is 13, 12 and all, I will wait till at least send them to a diabetologist, ask them to start something and come back, and then I will treat. Immediately on the first visit, I will not decide treatment. That is my basic take.
Does known CSR patients have increased choroidal thickness when disease is not active?
Can you repeat?
Does known CSR patient have increased choroidal thickness when disease is not active?
Non CSR patient, that is patient without CSR, have increased choroidal thickness. Oh, okay. Already CSR patients have increase in choroidal thickness when it is not active. I don't know. I don't have any document study to support it. But there are studies which show that with active disease, the thickness is more. When it becomes dry, thickness reduces, choroidal thickness. That sort of correlation has been done with EDI. But without activity, choroidal thickness increase, I don't have any data.
How frequently should you check for HCQ screening?
That's what I was telling. Based on guidelines, after starting HCQ, after 5 years, every year you should start checking. But this is not true in all cases. Liver diseases, renal diseases, obesity, all these cases may need early and already pre-existing some disease in the retina. So these cases will require early screening. So even though theoretically after 5 years, the rheumatologist for safety medically, they will send after 1 year itself, go and have a checkup. Then we will tell them to stop based on some vague finding. So this is happening, but we should be very careful when you tell discontinue HCQ. This is an HCQ toxicity.
One more question regarding HCQ.
Yeah.
It's from Dr. Anjana Krishnan. Which field is preferred? It's 10-2 or 24-2?
Actually, in Asians, they find 24-2 because more paramacular lesions have been found in Asians. That is not very parafoveal only. Around the little away from the fovea also, ellipsoid disruption has been found in Asians. So we are doing 24-2.
Which stage of full thickness macular hole is surgically treatable? Dr. Shobha and Edward.
All full thickness macular holes are treatable. If it is full thickness macular hole, you have to surgery is the treatment. Even if it is very small will have best prognosis, less than 100 microns. A large macular hole, as it goes bigger, the prognosis will reduce. Reasonably 80 to 90% of macular holes will close after surgery. That is general experience. So all stages can be treated. Earlier, the better.
Sir, how to differentiate between taut hyaloid and EMR?
ERM,
sorry.
Yeah. Taut hyaloid, actually, both, I mean, taut hyaloid, you are talking about DME? Maybe DME. Taut hyaloid is totally flat on the macula in DME. Taut hyaloid will not be seen in some other condition. ERM is an idiopathic disease where you will get multiple layers in the irregular layer. I don't think there is a problem with the, in fact, both have overlap. Even the hyaloid can proliferate, glial tissue proliferation can cause ERM. So both has overlap.
In fact, taut posterior hyaloid is a term reserved for diabetic macular edema.
Exactly. That's what I was saying.
OCT finding in fresh CRAO.
Fresh CRAO will have whitening of inner retinal layers. I showed one case, the classic whitening. Wherever there is edema, that cloudy swelling of the retina, you will see whitening of inner retinal layers in OCT. Classic, very early stage, within minutes.
Before the appearance of cherry red spot.
Need not have cherry red spot, but very early you can. But usually patient will come to doctor only after 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, earliest we have.
Then OCT changes in ischemic maculopathy in DM.
Yeah, actually, the one slide I showed.
Papa madam.
Yeah, ischemic macula. In the early phases, you will see cystoid changes rather than spongiform changes in the OCT in ischemic macula, and later it becomes atrophic macula in ischemia. These are the two OCT findings depending on the chronicity of OCT. So early and late. Now with Octa we can easily find out.
And Dr. Biju John has asked one more question. What changes have you made in your OCT taking methods in the current COVID scenario?
No, that patient is wearing the mask.
Out of the
And
topic,
Rajiv, you have to help me. We have not done anything. And the cleaning has to be done after every case. No AC in the OCT room. That's all, no? I think so.
Yeah, that's what AA was said.
Yeah.
Reduce the number of OCT.
Yeah.
Reduce the number of follow-up OCTs.
Yeah, routine DME follow-up and all, we can always differ. We are doing only in AMD where it is, you can't wait too much.
There's one more question. How long does the whitening of the inner layer and CRAO persist in OCT?
I have, after 1 week, it may disappear. For one and a half weeks later, it may disappear. I have seen. I don't know any textbook description is there, but after 1 week, it can reduce. The moment the whitening clinically goes, this also reduces.
No, you muted. Not audible. Mahesh, not audible.
No, mine
yeah,
is.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I think there are. Thank you. Are there any more questions? How about YouTube? Any questions?
YouTube, nothing is pending.
Okay. Thank you so much. With that, we'll wind up this program. Thank you so much, Mahesh, for the excellent talk. And it will remain in the YouTube forever. Anybody who's interested. Are there any more questions? Somebody has unmuted. If you want, you can ask directly to him.
Yes, Mahesh, it's a permanent record. It's a permanent postgraduate class.
It will be available, and I'll share the link. It's not sharing it. Whatever link what you have used now is the same link. It's going to remain. You can see it anytime you want at your time, and even you can share it to anybody you want. It is open.
Thank you.
Shall we wind up? Dr. Shobha, do you want to ask something directly? You can unmute and ask. Dr. Natasha is there. No, there's nobody.
Okay.
Oh, with that, we'll wind up. Thank you so much,
Sure.
Mahesh. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Shashi sir, all the others, seniors, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in this webinar. Thank you so much. We'll come up with better topics later. It was a very wonderful presentation, Mahesh. Went on very smoothly.